Christian here. Before we get into our video and our very animated discussion today, did want to note, everyone, this is a highly controversial topic that could be potentially triggering. It does deal with some sensitive topics related to sexual abuse and how the government is supposed to handle those, the role of citizens in speaking up about them. They're very controversial figures that, such as Tommy Robinson, Keir Starmer, that would behoove more research on your part on both parts. We just touch on, again, this is sort of an introductory video for people who are new to that. There are much more serious and explicit and disturbing accusations and crimes than we go into. I don't want to say this is the limit of it, but because of our audience and because of YouTube and the media, our discussion will stay sort of at a little more mild level. It doesn't mean there's more disturbing things, but that's something you should explore on your own. Appreciate your support and be informed this could be triggering for some, but it's an important thing that we know about, and it's why it's being discussed so broadly at this time. Thank you for your support.
So, yeah, so basically he's just trying to expose.
Yeah, so he's been was raising just some some ideas of like, should we at least talk about this? And nobody wanted to talk about it. So he aligned with there used to be a far right British National Party and a couple other ones not really around, and son of fascist. I can't say I agree with 100% of the thing he does, but as far as the political parties that have power, the Tory or the Conservative Party, the UK Reform Party, or the Liberal Dems, nobody would have anything to do with him as far as that goes. He has served a couple of different prison terms. One was for entering the U.S. under a friend's passport. He has tried to seek political asylum in the U.S., has been denied. But his most recent conviction was a civil case where he did some journalist research. We can talk about this. Essentially, there was a Pakistani youth,
Right.
minor, who was assaulted by a British, also a minor, classmate. And this case was handled by the school. They supposedly, this Pakistani ethnic Pakistani Muslim kid had said some inappropriate things or made some girls uncomfortable, and this British guy in an act of sort of defending them kind of roughed him up a little bit. It wasn't a violent beatdown. It didn't have to be hospitalized or anything, but it was some harassment.
Sure.
And anyway, the school knew about it. There were suspensions, and it was being dealt with. But then a few months later, a shortened clip of this interaction of the white British kid, harassing and beating this smaller Pakistani kid, goes viral. And even though, and all the political people who get shown this clip and immediate reaction to it, their knee-jerk reaction.
It's got to be racism.
Unacceptable.
It just can't.
Without digging into
it just can't be without just two kids fighting.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's not possible.
And no journalists were digging into it either, and it became quite a viral kind of thing. And so Tommy, all he did was sort of what a journalist should do. He went and he interviewed students, the people involved, right, and the administrators, and found, okay, this was an unprovoked attack simply because of this person's ethnic or religious identity. It was because of behaviors that were bothering this other student.
Which, of course, that doesn't excuse somebody. Right.
Oh yeah, and I'm not excusing it either, right? And that's why he was suspended, and there were consequences. But it wasn't what everybody was saying it to be. It was indicative of naked racial aggression. And so Tom, this is what Tommy says, and he creates a documentary about it. And basically, he was going after the media and the powers, other powers who were being lazy and trying to create a narrative rather
Right.
than dig into it a little bit more. And so he created this documentary about that and the kind of persecution that he was facing just to produce something like that. And they don't have freedom of speech in Great Britain, so he was told he could not post his documentary. And he went to Holland and posted it on X, and that's what the contempt of court
That's,
is. And when he re-entered the country, was arrested and
I got to
imprisoned.
say, that's just, I mean, you know, it's, to be fair, I'm an American, right? So we have this luxury
Yeah.
of freedom of
Yeah.
speech, but it's just mind boggling to me. Like every time I hear of any account anywhere in the world where freedom of speech is not just part of the culture, it blows my mind. I'm like, what do you mean you can't say what you want? Like, if you're not, like, you know, committing defamation or libel, like, why not? And it's
Well, they said it was they accused him of he was convicted of libel against this student or
by
whatever
just digging into it.
by posting yeah
That's
his
insane.
anyway. But the yeah, I guess the free speech laws, especially because right now Britain, as of their last election, the Liberal Labour Party is taking power. Keir Starmer, and so they're especially sensitive to any Islamophobic, what they say, statements and any criticism of
Of course.
right Islam system, especially because the Islamic bloc is a part of their voting
Right.
base, so they're very
Right.
much protected. Now, why we're talking about this now is because in the last week or so, Elon Musk has used his platform to elevate this
Right.
story, to pluck it out. It's been something that's been going on for a long time, but and especially one of the issues that Tommy raised, not it's not why he's in jail, but one of the issues was that there were a large amount of these Pakistani Asian um, groups, unmarried men, single men, that would groom underage British white girls, and usually in lower class neighborhoods, um, and then have sexual relations
Now,
that they could not consent
real
to.
quick, tell me what that word means to you, because it's a word that's used a lot. Groom.
So groom is to uh, use uh, yeah, essentially like seduction. Use a gradual
Got it.
process to uh, right, rather than just straight force in person. Sometimes you can groom them with alcohol or gifts or other things, but minors cannot give consent.
Right.
They cannot consent. So even if a minor says that because you were nice to them or because of whatever, that they would like to have sexual relations with you, you can't do that. And if you as an adult do, you're at fault,
It's an
right?
interesting.
You can be nice. You can be nice and kind to minors, but if they take that and say they would now like to have sex with you, you must say no,
You got to
or
cut it
it will
off,
be
right?
statutory
Well,
rape. Yeah,
it's an interesting word to use, and I've seen it used in several different circumstances. One of which is a positive circumstance, right? Like, for example, at one point in time, I was what one might say was groomed for upper management, right? I was groomed for
yeah,
movement from management
yeah.
to district management. And what that basically meant was, you know, given a couple of extra skill sets, like they had, you know, my boss just
Mhm.
spent a little extra time with me. But I could definitely see the application in a negative way, where you're kind of seducing somebody into a different culture, a different style of relationship, a different.
Essentially, you slowly normalize inappropriate
Got it.
behavior, and so the person would affect it. There are a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of people that is a mansplaining version of
Fair.
it, but it's essentially where the person is saying yes, but because they're a minor, they can't say
Right.
yes.
Now,
If you're an adult, you take an adult woman out to dinner, and ask her back and see if she consents to romantic, physically romantic activities. That's
well,
fine.
yeah.
You take somebody underage
Right.
out, give them a dinner, a nice time. They've had a good time. They want to engage in romantic sensibilities. You say, unfortunately, that
Yeah.
cannot happen. You cannot consent to
Grow up
those
first, sure.
with me being an adult. Right.
Unless she's really
So,
attractive.
but
I'm
there was
kidding.
a
I'm kidding.
deliberate.
I'm kidding.
Well, these grooming gangs, and this is all documented.
Right.
This is not conjecture. We're talking about very young girls from the ages of 9, 10 to maybe 14.
Right.
And we're not talking about like 17-year
Right.
olds or very attractive 16-year olds. These are very young girls. And the families and others were alerted. The authorities were alerted to this happening.
Yep.
And they didn't stop it. They didn't
Many
prosecute
times.
because of many times because of cultural sensitivities. Oh, this is in their culture, right? It was sort of rather than hold them to the standard that, hey, they're living in Britain. This is a standard in the West, right? Children cannot consent. If you have sexual contact with them, you have committed a felony, and there are consequences for that. Whether you confess or admit or say you're sorry or not, there's still consequences. So, so that case finally got some exposure. Tommy Robinson was, obviously part of it, exposing it and trumpeting it, and a way of saying that they need to be vigilant. Well, what they found out more is there were cases that were tried to be brought forward, and police would come across a certain
Yep.
case to charge someone with that sort of violent crime of rape, whether statutory or non-statutory rape, requires a higher level of sort of clearance from a prosecutor. It's called like a crown clearance or
Right.
something. And the prosecutor, the person involved in giving these prosecutions and a clearance, and who was denying them, was Keir Starmer, who is the current uh, prime minister of Great
Right.
Britain now that Labour is taking control. And so that's what Elon Musk was tweeting about, that Keir Starmer should not have credibility on the Muslim issue because he has shown that he will protect his political base and not prosecute them in the face of egregious
Right.
evidence that they've committed acts, and that any type of criticism of that now, he is throwing people in jail, and so it can really only be talked about on X and in America because they can't talk about this in Britain, or they can be literally
Now let
locked up,
me.
right? And then, yeah,
No,
sorry.
yeah, good, good. So I just have a question now, and this is kind of an interesting, like, philosophical dilemma. Um, in the abstract, it's very difficult to, like, when this culture clash takes place, to like disseminate who's correct. But I feel like I'm biased, because obviously I'm in the Western civilization, so I kind of have this Western civ mindset where I'm like, everything should kind of sort of conform to my ideals. But in the abstract, I'm wondering do you believe that if, like, let's say somebody comes in to America, for example, and they're Buddhist, they're pacifist, for example, right? And would you say that they have? I can see. I'm trying to think of a good way to get this out. There are situations where we do respect that culture's their religious or their social proclivity, because like we don't make a pacifist sign up for the draft, for example, even though everybody else has to. Like, we don't make them do some things, but then in this case, like, I think the Muslim culture, whether I agree with it or not, and I definitely disagree with it, they definitely do have this culture of like marrying very, very, very young girls. Like, and it dates back to Muhammad's time. Again, I just want to say, personally, I find that despicable.
They don't have the same what we would call social mores.
Right.
Right, it's more acceptable in the right to have cousin marriage. Yeah, their marriages and stuff are things that we in the West have a different opinion on. But the law. If you were going to immigrate to
Right.
Pakistan, and you were to commit something that for you, right, maybe it wasn't a big deal, like raising pigs and eating a bacon sandwich or something, and
Which
but that's really offensive to them and gets you thrown in jail anyway,
I would, and I need my
right?
bacon.
So you're you're expected to comply with what the law is in the land you live in.
Yeah,
Nobody is forcing them to immigrate
but
to
only
the U.S.
sometimes.
and and because it's also a crime against another person. It is a
Fair.
right, when you're a pacifist, or right, it's different when it's like, oh, in my country
Allegedly.
I can, uh what uh take somebody's coat that I like, and now it's my coat or something. And you're like, sorry, can't do that in the U.S. or that I can charge people different amounts based on whether I think they're rich enough or not. Like, no, the price has to, in my store. No, your price has to be the same for everybody. Right. So, like when the transaction involves other
Yeah, that
people,
makes sense.
and not animals, and not their own sort of conscience. That's why we have laws. You've come to live, not as a hermit in the woods, but with other people, right? So if you want to come and live out in the middle of nowhere and interact with nobody, we'll give you a long leash. But if you want to live in cities and interact with people, and especially in ways that we feel like are abusive, um, it's been a big slog for Western society to deem inappropriate activity, sexual activity, sexual abuse, and it's a gradual process of every generation trying to clarify it and do it a little bit less, do it a little bit
Right.
less. And this is a part of our culture, and it's a big red line that we've drawn. There's a lot of uh,
Uh-huh.
permissiveness in our culture, but when it comes to children, we have to respect, hands off. Adults don't get to be sexual with children, or there will be severe
Now, what if it was from
consequences.
within the culture? And that's hypothetically, like, what if they, for example, came as a pair to the new kitten? They immigrated, like, a husband and wife, but the wife
Mhm.
is 13 or something. But they immigrate together, and now they're in a different land. What about that kind of situation? What do you think?
Well, right. So right, that's the type of exceptions that bureaucracies have to adjudicate on a case by case
Gotcha. Okay.
basis. And so, as a straw man, it would have to go through, and they'd have to see, was this a forced marriage, and of the minor, because any sort of contracts a minor sign are null and
Right.
void, right? And so, is this something that and would have to have the option now in the West of, that coming to the West means that there are now new options available for that
Right. Right.
child that maybe wasn't available before. But this was not
Right.
that case. This case was um, Westerners, and so there's a lot of sort of culture
Yeah.
clash items. But yeah, Elon Musk has brought it up and is using it as a bully pulpit, and essentially bringing up that um, there needs to be a reasonable discussion about, and not just this hands off, or we're terrified to. There has to be a reasonable criticism of the Muslim community in Great Britain, and have it not be
Right.
considered
Right.
illegal speech, right? And so they're struggling with that right now. For our watchers out there, you can go on X, try to find Tommy Robinson's documentary if you want to watch it. If you want to read more about the grooming gangs and that, and I guess the big issue is it's frustrating for people over there because they don't seem to be learning these
Right.
lessons. Right. One of the really sad examples that Elon brought up was um, two minor girls were taken, were plied with alcohol, and in the home with seven adult Asian men. These were girls in their early teens, were either completely naked or nearly naked. A neighbor hears a girl screaming, calls the police. The police come, and they see this happening. They don't question any of the seven adult men. in their apartment. They take the girls and charge them with underage drinking, right?
Mm.
And
That's just
right, and it's sort of a refusal to engage, and so people are like, hey, what the standard? This is, and so they're just trying to uh, to have something and do some more research on it. But it is interesting that Elon has decided to use his platform to promote this
yep.
as well, and hopefully it can bring about some change. But yeah, free speech in America is huge,
It's
huge.
heartbreaking to hear about some of these cases, and I mean, before
Yeah,
you go looking, before you go down this rabbit hole, I've done a little bit of digging, and I just want to tell you, just prepare yourself because it's not some of this stuff is
it's
not easy
dark.
to read, but yeah, but and thank God, just thank God that we live in a nation where that hasn't like this kind of aloofness by the law hasn't taken place yet, and I just pray that it never comes because I never want to get to the. I see in postmodernism some of the glimmers of, I don't want to touch this because this race is a quote
Well,
unquote oppressed race or an oppressed sex or oppressed class, or I don't want to
yeah,
get down that road where it's all of a sudden we can't treat them equally under the law. I think treating them everybody
yeah,
equally under the law is one of the highest moral aspirations that a nation can have,
yeah.
and I just hope that it stays that way. But what do you guys think at home? Let us know what you think, and
Yeah.
let us know if you're
Is there for us? I think, especially Americans, people that know maybe the name Tommy Robinson doesn't have so much
right.
um, visceral connections like he does in Britain, that we're able to see his claims a little more soberly. I think there's too much of a gut reaction. People just equate him with the far right, Nazism, or whatever the narrative that has painted him. That if we can, without that, sort of soberly appraise his claims, I think that's really what for the common man. I think that would be the best thing that we could do, because in Britain, he's definitely not getting any type of establishment um, support.
Right now, I have one more question for you. What do you think? What do you
Sure.
think about? So part of this controversy, of course, is Elon, right? And it is the fact that this is the richest man on earth. This is a man with
Mhm.
outrageous connection to agency. I mean, he can basically do whatever he wants. He can basically accomplish almost any task, almost any feat of human.
He has the resources to put behind making something he'd
So the
like
question
real. Yes.
is it right, fair, just for him to extend his reach in social media to influence nations abroad? Because I mean, he's got just him making a little tweet is like just carries a powerhouse punch of weight, something that you and I will have eventually.
Well, he would say yes, yes. He would hope, I think he'd do that because the mainstream media in Britain and in the world have turned a blind eye to this, because of postmodernism or because of woke leftism, um, and that he feels like this needs to be aired, and people need to come to grips with it, and needs to be legitimized, and the people need to say we won't allow this to happen again under our for any other sort of embarrassment or awkwardness about dealing with people from a less advanced culture, that have come to live in our country. We're still going to we're not going to stand by and let um, children, citizens here, suffer those
So I
consequences.
I agree that
You know,
when it's in defense of for example, one who cannot defend themselves, like children, I think it's very appropriate. What do you think about like in the cases where I mean, because Elon Musk basically tweets about everything all the time, right? He's kind of like Trump.
whatever interest, and that's free speech. If
Fair,
something like us, if somebody doesn't come out and tell us what we're interested in talking about, and so yeah, he owns X, so obviously he's not going to get banned
right?
by X himself. But
Probably,
that was something that they would do
right?
before, right? Why he bought it, that he's allowing a lot more free speech on his venue. If you're not on X, there are community notes that will try to note if something is misleading
Right.
or a clip or AI
Right.
generated. But it's not perfect. You're still going to have to use some discernment,
Right.
but it is an important way of learning about things that the mainstream media do not want to report because of their postmodern
All right.
ideas.
Well, guys, let us know what you think about at home, and don't forget to like and subscribe and comment below and tell us how you feel. We'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.